Keep in touch with the Wolf Connection podcast on our Instagram handle at the Wolf Connection Pod, or email us your questions, comments, and guest ideas to podcast@wolfconnection.org. Thank you for your support, and howls to you all. Welcome to the Wolf Connection podcast. I'm your host, John Kaufman. So riding solo for this first episode of what we're going to title Wolf Tracks, and really this has come about because of an individual who we've had on the podcast a couple times before, who we've talked in person in Montana at the Wolf Summit there, and really just to get all of you informed about the current events, the things that are happening, not just in the wolf world, but in the wildlife world in general. And so who better to really talk about a lot of this stuff than Carter Niemeyer, who joins me from snowy Idaho. You said there's a break in the weather today, Carter. So how's everything going over there as you're trying to keep warm there in the 20s?
Yeah, the weather was kind of our second snowmageddon for me since I moved to Boise 23 years ago. And yeah, we've got about a foot of snow on the ground here, and it just persists in snowing 3-4 inches every evening. And so we're just kind of dug in and taking it day by day.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was just telling you before the contrast in the weather here in California, where we were hoping for to get some of that cooler weather, especially for the wolves in the sanctuary, and we've hit sort of like a hot spell where it's in the 60s and we might even reach the 70s at some point. So just very weird weather that's happening all over the place.
Climate change is a good description because some areas it's warming up and some areas it's cooling down, and the moisture is so erratic you can't predict what's going to happen.
No, absolutely. And so we just got to, I guess, sort of take it day by day and week by week, and hopefully things will either normalize out, or we'll just have to deal with what we got to deal with. But again, I want to thank you for the inspiration really to do this, just because of what you do on a regular basis, which is you take in a lot of information, you give information to everybody who follows you, and this to me is something that we can really expand upon and give people sort of articles to look at, and really the things that are happening in wildlife news. And I guess right off the bat, I want to get your feelings about the Colorado reintroduction, just because now we actually officially have paws on the ground. We have 10 wolves that are there, relocated from Oregon. How did you feel that all went down, and what is it like now to officially say that we have wolves on the Western Slope in Colorado?
Well, I'm going to look at it in a positive light. I've seen people throwing stones and being very critical already, but as far as going to Oregon, having the wolves caught and transported, processed, and released, I think it couldn't went much smoother, really. I mean, it was so quick and happened so suddenly that I think a lot of people were, of course, taken by surprise that it was that easy. But apparently Oregon had a lot of wolves over there to be able to go out and catch as many as they did in a couple of days' time. So, it went smoothly. You've got them in Colorado as designed, and what each individual wolf does is anyone's guess. But we just got to watch what unravels in the next days and weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just spoke with Rob Edward from Rocky Mountain Wolf Project, and he was really giving us the lowdown, and obviously as the journey sort of culminates in the release, and obviously everything that happens after this is really, I think, where the hard work happens. As you would probably know from experience, it's more post paws on the ground. Obviously they'll have 2 or 3 more releases depending upon population. And I guess that brings me to one of the first articles that we're going to talk about, or that just we want people to be aware of, that you posted. And this was from Sky High News, which serves, looks like Grand County, Colorado. And like you were saying, it went so smooth. I think some of it was a little bit surprising. And the headline here from this article was, some CPW commissioners believe trust was broken over lack of communication during wolf releases. And it seems as though this is tapping into the rural-urban divide, possibly saying that, I guess, the locations weren't shared with where the wolves are going to be dropped. But as you said, it seemed as though this went so smooth that you can't necessarily contact everyone right away and say, hey, this is where they're going to go. What did you get from that article, and what are kind of the points that if somebody looks at this, if they read through it, that they should really get from the information that's being put out here by Sky High News?
Well, I see a lot of the articles that have come out, are a lot of negativity built in, that you didn't do this right and you did this wrong and you didn't think this out. And it's a big undertaking. And certainly, I'm sure there's a lot of communications that could have been better, but I think everybody had a job to do at the time. And I think give them a chance. I mean, the first one sometimes is a rough go. We did the reintroduction from Canada almost 30 years ago too, and I can tell you, being on the ground up there and watching the whole story unfold, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of gears turning, and certainly it's easy to overlook things because sometimes you're all focused on, getting the wolves caught safely, get them transported safely, hoping that nothing breaks down, you don't lose an animal. And probably the last thing in a lot of people's mind is letting everyone in on the story, because my gosh, where do you draw the line of who do you call and who you contact? And sure, I mean, I'm certain a lot of people, probably hundreds of people, would have liked to have been standing there, watching history made, but that's not feasible in my opinion. So, yeah, I'm sure that communications could have been better, and from what I see, the agency is hoping they're going to do better next time. And so I say give them some slack, and if people don't give them slack, then I think there's more of a political message that we're going to beat you up. We're not going to give you any latitude that you did anything right because we really don't like what happened. And, there's folks that don't want wolves on the ground in the first place. So certainly if you're in opposition of all of this, you're going to be probably more critical and not give your opponent any, latitude to say, attaboy, you did good.
Yeah, exactly. It really seems that was the gist of the article, is that CPW, whoever it is, better be careful, because otherwise private lands will be shut and then they won't be welcome anymore. And it really just seems, like you said, the latitude or the rope that's being given there is very short. And it was, again, in all the people we've spoken to, yourself included, it really seems as though Colorado has done its best to have everyone included. You were part of those working groups. Just, I think, really quick before we move on to the next article, what's the difference? Like you said, you were on the ground, so that, like you said, there are so many moving parts, so many moving things that are happening. Where is the mindset for those that are on the ground as opposed to those who, again, I think are thinking, like you said, more in these political arenas about, well, I wasn't called or contacted or shown or whatever it is. Where is your mindset, like you say, getting the wolves and making sure that part of it is taken care of and that the animal is transported and put down on the ground safely?
Well, I've always thought that is the most important part of all, is the welfare of the wolves and the safety of the capture teams. So being on the ground, that's really all I ever thought about. And you're concerned too that, there's so many logistics. And on the surface sounds, I mentioned the word easy. It's not easy, but, you catch 10 wolves and transport them from Oregon to California and do all the handling and take all the risks and subject animals to sedation. A lot of things can go wrong. And that's what, on the ground level, that's what you're totally focused on. It's not worrying about whether you offended somebody or left somebody out. That can all be dealt with later. And I can understand too, if you're the decision maker at the top, you got to be careful of, telling too many people too many things, making too many assurances, because if something does happen, something very negative, something very unfortunate, then you got to, backpedal and you've put out the information ahead of yourself that you made predictions and suddenly there's a big glitch. So I can understand that everyone is being cautious, and let's take it one step at a time, and let's get these wolves moved safely. Let's get the crews all home safely, and we'll put them on the ground. And like I said, this is gonna happen for another 2-3 years or 4 years. I don't know how long they'll keep releasing animals. Next time, maybe
Right.
take the next step and involve more people. But really, realistically, folks, we have talked about this for a couple of years and work on being a member of the technical working group. Everybody knew what was coming. It went off scripted. So,
Right.
to start throwing stones that you didn't like because you got left out. I mean, nobody, I don't think, were really left out leading up to the actual introduction.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. And I think, and again, anybody who wants to read the full article, the full scope, just go to Sky High News, search. It's very recent. I think it was posted in earlier this month, probably about a week or so ago, and just go through that. But that's a good jumping off point for us. It leads into the next one, which you posted not too far after, I think after that one. This is from the Flathead Beacon, and I believe more of an opinion. It seems like it's more of an opinion piece. It was in the Out of Bounds section called Never Ending Wolf Wars. And it says wolf restoration in the Northern Rockies has been an unqualified success, but wolf management, not so much. And I think this really gears towards more of your, it seems more the introduction that you were a part of, the ones in Montana and Idaho. And it sort of gets into the number game where, again, I think we're talking about these numbers that initially we were talking, I think, whatever it was, 300 wolves, 30 breeding pairs, the whole deal, and how the populations naturally are going to continue to populate, and how the wolf management, I guess, hasn't gone so well for certain groups, and understanding that these numbers have gone well beyond the initial ask, which was 330, whatever it was, that was a stable population. So what did you sort of glean from this? And it really just seemed that we're sort of rehashing old wounds or rehashing old things like that. Is that what you got from something like this that was out of the Flathead Beacon?
Yeah, the wolf wars, I don't think they'll ever end. I mean, it's there's science and politics, and you're trying to blend the two, and you come from different angles with that kind of approach. But yeah, going back to the basics, the 300 wolves and 30 breeding pairs equitably distributed over the 3 recovery areas, that was a very bare minimum. Yeah, and I'm not going to second guess. I mean, I was on the review as a review member of the EIS team. I was aware of all of these scenarios we looked at. And I think looking back, 300 wolves was a very, very bare minimum. And I think part of that was politics, is let's not set the numbers too high, or there was enough resistance back then to doing this. Sometimes I look back and think, wow, we did it, because I was a skeptic that politically this may never happen. But I certainly don't ever look at that as a ceiling. 300 wolves. Yeah, that was to get things kind of started and build a foundation. But I turned into a wolf advocate 30 years later, and 2,500, 3,000 wolves in the Western U.S. To me is that seems to me like a nice sustainable population. And now we seem within at least Idaho, Montana, Wyoming is there's the biological carrying capacity, which is probably 2,500, 3,000 wolves, but we're dealing with social carrying capacity. We're dealing now with tolerance. And there's a lot of people intolerant of these wolves. And there's a lot of people saying, you said 300. Now we got 2,000 or 3,000 and they got to be controlled and they got to be killed and so on and so forth. And I don't really believe that, but it's not surprising that politically you got to have a vent on the teapot, and throwing the wolves to the recreational wolf trappers and gunners to go out and kill wolves is one of those release valves. And same with wildlife services having the latitude to kill wolves that are attacking livestock. You got to have that release valve. So I can understand everybody's opinions. Nobody's probably happy, and that's why these wars continue. But I find it objectionable that that we're allowing trappers to kill 20, or trappers and hunters to kill 20 in Montana, but here in Idaho, I mean, theoretically it's impossible, but one person has an unlimited quota. If you're a good hunter and trapper and that's all you did down here from morning till noon till night, you can kill 100, you can kill 300, you can kill 500. And certainly very few individuals are going to probably even reach 20, but still the legislatures and that too, they just keep writing the rules. You can use night scopes, you can use almost anything and every method now to kill them. And private land, we're going to kill them year round. And on public lands, 6, 8, 9 months a year. It's relentless. And I think if the objective is to kill off the wolves, that isn't going to happen. And I think if the objective of killing all these wolves is to save the livestock industry, well, the livestock industry is not at risk, in my opinion. And if it's to save elk numbers since the reintroduction 30 years ago are higher now than they were then. So 2,500, 3,000 wolves are not eating us out of house and home. They're not destroying the livestock industry. And certainly they're not controlling the elk. The elk are controlling the wolves. The more food you have, the more successful wolf families and packs are. And to me, it's very obvious that right now, anyhow, with the mild winters we've had, everything's kind of in balance. The wolves got more than enough to eat, but certainly are not making inroads into reducing elk herds. But we keep being reminded that, well, what about the elk herd in the Lolo? And what about the elk herd in the Clearwater? Well, yeah, if you want to cherry pick little spots that have their own problems, called habitat issues and fire suppression and a multitude of other factors, yeah, we can say you don't have enough elk in this spot. But overall, we've got elk popping at the seams around here, and more elk herds growing out here in the ag fields, living on alfalfa. So anyhow, I could go on and on about this, but that's the picture I see.
Yeah, no, I hear that with you, and we've spoken with a couple people from Wyoming who are they're hunters, and they go out and they say there's among, I think, I hate saying rank and file, but among the general public, the general hunting public, there seems to be zero issue with finding their elk or 2 elk or even 3. He's like, we've talked to individuals who said you can go out and get 2 elk pretty much no problem if you just, you know where to go. And so again, it really just seems this was, like you said, I think stirring the embers or stirring the pot, whatever you want to call it here, and just almost seeming as if that this was, again, an opinion piece and just sort of reiterating all the old comments that management isn't, what it's supposed to be or what it was. I mean, at the end, the last line, it says for that, there's blame enough for everyone involved, meaning that wolf management hasn't lived up, I guess, to what was spoken to 25, 30 years ago. So anyway, I think those, if anybody wants to read this in full, just go to Flathead Beacon and you'll see Never Ending Wolf Wars. It's in the Out of Bounds section there. I did want to, before we move on to the next one, Carter, there was one that caught my eye. I believe, I don't know if you posted it, but I saw it, I think, through our feed on Instagram. Idaho, I believe that they stopped moving forward, I think, with the aerial hunting. I believe that was Idaho, saying that they were going to stop the aerial hunting of predators. This is obviously just isn't to wolves. This is for mountain lions and bears and things like that. Can you comment on that and what sort of the developments led up to them halting that piece of legislation or allowing those things to happen?
Well, there was an intention this fall to bring in a private contractor from Nevada to aerial gun wolves in some of the historic loss areas that involved 5 or 6 different livestock producers or grazing associations. The whole thing kind of fell apart for a number of reasons, but first of all, the person that they intended to hire from Nevada had a rap sheet back starting in 2015. The guy was a poacher, had been caught for game violations. He was trapping and not checking his traps. And so there was all of that dirt that came up about his background and shady past. So that kind of drew attention to start with. And then secondarily, the contracts that were going to be let to actually just allow, several $100,000, well, $140,000, I think, total to these individual producers to hire him to come in. Several of those producers claimed they had never been even contacted. So suddenly their name's in the paper and they're like, I'm no part of this. I didn't even know about it. So they had to have another meeting to kind of go, oops, who dropped the ball? And the negative publicity and the poor planning came into the limelight, where they just decided, I think, we're going to just terminate this whole thing before it gets any messier. So it gives you the impression, that, well, there's going to be no more aerial hunting in Idaho by private individuals. But that's not necessarily true, because since back around 2012, Idaho Fish and Game have had contractors come over and kill wolves in this Lolo Clearwater area on the north side of the wilderness, Frank Church Wilderness, to save elk. So since about 2012, about 25 wolves a year are being shot from helicopters in that area to save elk. And I don't see that program necessarily terminated. And Idaho Fish and Game definitely has the latitude to fly anywhere and everywhere they want to, outside the wilderness to control wolves. They think are a problem, especially to game herds. So there's a mixed message there. Yes, this particular person, one guy out of Nevada, that program shut down, but wildlife services are still aerial gunning wolves in problem areas. Idaho Fish and Game are aerial gunning wolves where they're trying to protect elk. So there's still those programs going on, whether you know it or not.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's good that you say that the mixed messaging here is that, yes, the one thing was pushed aside because of all these issues. Again, flawed planning, and like you said, the individual themselves, who obviously had an interesting past there. And I think I just searched it online. So if you go to Cache, I believe I'm saying this correctly, so I apologize to Cache Valley Daily.com does have the story, but you can find it. Idaho officials rescind approval of flawed plan to hunt wolves from helicopters. That looks like Charlie Schill reported on that there. So you can obviously search and get a little bit more information about, like Carter was saying, this specific program or this specific plan was shut down. But there are other ones that we obviously have to keep our eye on, that aerial gunning is going to continue, I think, at certain areas. We're going to stay in Colorado, Carter, but we're going to move to a different species. And also this one, again, this article that I found and I wanted to get your opinion on here. This is also from Sky High News. This is talking about mountain lions. My second favorite. I love lions. They're beautiful, beautiful creatures. But this is very disturbing to me. So the headline here was Colorado cuts April hunting season. Electronic lures after 198 mountain lions were killed in a month. And on the subset here, of those lions killed, nearly 44% were female, posing a risk to cubs born to breeding age lions in that population. So just from reading that, and we'll go into a little bit of the article itself, but for that many mountain lions to be killed in that short a period of time, what can that do to a population, and almost half of them being breeding age females? What are the consequences there for something like this?
Well, it's a broad question, and I'm not a mountain lion expert by any means, but
Right.
my first impression is it says there's a lot of mountain lions. For hunters to be that successful, good mountain lion hunting requires a good population to find or locate, and secondly, must have had pretty good snow conditions and other factors that made, I assume these were taken with hound dogs and so forth too. Mountain lion hunting, again, it's recreational, whether it's being done under the guise of, well, we're controlling mountain lions because you're killing too many big game animals. I don't have that background information to know if that's necessary, but in most cases, hunting mountain lions is recreational. Certainly, if you don't regulate the take on female lions and you're killing, the cubs are collateral damage. As a biologist, I'd say certainly that is a factor. I guess I'd have to know how big an area these lions were taken out of. If it's a small area, then you have sink areas, they call them. The surrounding mountain lion habitats got a lot of lions, which are going to probably move back into those places. But I believe, the magic number was from research that Dr. Rob Wilgus and other people have done over the years. I think they talk about just taking only maybe 14% or 17% of the population and keeping the harvest of big males reduced, because it can go either way, I guess, in my observations, that if you killed a bunch of old male lions who occupy quite a bit of territory and mate with several females, that you're going to have an influx of subadult males. So I can't tell you that killing 198 lions is necessarily detrimental to the population or not, depending how big an area you're talking and how big an area surrounds it, where non-resident lions are coming back in, and infiltrating that area. But you're talking from a livestock point of view too. Anytime you create a bunch of chaos in a predator population and take out a whole bunch of lions that might be living in balance with the livestock industry and not causing problems, that's where I always see this indiscriminate take of a lot of lions, a lot of coyotes, a lot of wolves, is you're inviting these other players to move back into the area. And some of them might like to eat sheep. Some of them might like to kill livestock. So you're, again, as far as management's going, I look at it, it's a recreational treat for those who enjoy chasing mountain lions and killing them. If you're doing it to save elk or protect livestock, not so much.
Right. As you have all this knowledge, obviously from being in the field for decades, what just speak, I think, briefly, or just as best you can, because you brought up such a great point, and we've discussed this with you a couple of times or multiple times over the course of us meeting and having these conversations. Like you say, the balance between whether it be packs of wolves, of coyotes, of lions, bears even, and the relationship, like you say, with the livestock that may be already grazing in these areas, that they understand this is not their food source. They clearly go and hunt wild ungulates. They're not, depredating or doing anything. And like you say, just speak to how, I don't know if that balance is fragile, but what it means, like you say, for these predators to be taken out of that equation. And like you say, possibility of and I use the word in quotes, troubled predators coming and filling in those gaps where, like you say, they're more apt to take a cow or a cattle that's sort of sitting there and just sort of waiting to be taken.
Well, I just want to emphasize that when we talk about management again, what does management mean? To me, management is, some level of killing.
Right.
But one of my constant concerns always is that the public and society understand that most of this predator killing is recreational. It doesn't have to be done. It's something that we've always done in this country, and there's a certain number of people that enjoy hunting predators. But let's just be clear that I don't really look at, whether it's going in and killing 198 mountain lions or whether it's killing hundreds of wolves each winter recreationally. I don't look at that as helpful in protecting deer, protecting elk, or protecting livestock, because you don't know where the conflicts are going to be each year. There'll be a pack of wolves that decide they're going to kill sheep or cattle. And you can selectively, surgically remove that pack, solve the problem, and everyone move on. But if somebody goes in there and, kills 30, 40 wolves in the winter at random, I don't see that helping the livestock industry because it doesn't necessarily target the animals that are the problem. Same with mountain lions, same with even coyotes. I just got to always remind people that if you're growing sheep and you have coyotes around and they're not killing your sheep, you want those coyotes to stay around those sheep because they're working as guard dogs for you. And it can be that way with other predators.
Absolutely.
A big old Tom mountain lion can live right amongst your livestock, but it's used to killing natural prey. It's used to killing deer and elk. And that big old mountain lion is keeping 10 subordinate 2 or 3 year old male mountain lions out of the area who are desperately looking for a territory, and they're hungry and they're inexperienced. Those are the ones that might kill your livestock. So I have to get that in there each time that control of problem predators is totally separate from recreational killing of predators.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. It's almost as if there's wisdom that comes with age. It seems like that happens in all forms of life. But I agree. And we, like I said, we have talked about this, and it's really something that, again, as we try to get this information out more and more, and why I think this is such a great idea to speak with you on it and hit these points as we see these articles and we dive a little bit deeper into what the issues are. And so again, if anybody wants to read that, and it's a short clicked article there, I think there'll be probably more news on this. So again, that's Sky High News, and you can check that out if you just search about Colorado and talk about mountain lions there. I want to move on here, Carter, to grizzly bears. And this was, I know, one that you highlighted. I don't know if it was a little bit, probably a week or so ago, but this was written by Doug Peacock. And the article here, or it was in Alta, ALTA, and it's the title here is "The Coming War on Grizzly Bears." Subset: Last year's shameful slaughter in Alaska may be repeated soon in Montana. So we're obviously moving on to a different species here, but this really seems, even with the wolf people that we've spoken with, grizzly bears really seem to be on the docket next in terms of not only legislation, hunting, culling, taking, again, removing animals because of the population growth. Where, if you were to look at this, what is really the main point that's being made here, and the fear I think that's coming for people who want to preserve grizzly bears, that are trying to make sure that this population continues to grow and thrive? Because again, I think when we've looked at maps, the grizzly bear population probably isn't at a sustainable population as it sits currently. But what's the main takeaway from this that we should learn from Doug, and what should Montanans be looking at, and the reason why this is such a something that should be feared, I guess, or something that should be looked upon, that bears could be next on the docket in Montana coming from Alaska?
Well, I'm a retired private citizen now and not a government wildlife biologist any longer, but my first reaction is, and working, on the inside for 33 years of government service, I fear that politicians, legislators, people are anxious to delist the grizzly bear. They are popping at the seams in their very restricted habitat that remains. And I fear that it's going to go take the pathway of the wolf. We recovered the wolves successfully. We built that population up quickly. First of all, we got to separate, wolves have a high reproductive rate, grizzly bears do not. But I just fear that they're going to say, let the state manage them. And then the legislatures seem more and more to tell the fish and game agencies what to do. They demand, they write law and tell the fish and game agencies to, carry out our wishes. And I worry about opening up to grizzly seasons, killing grizzlies, kill them here, kill them there. And with their low reproductive rate and their restricted areas they live in, it could be a wreck. And I guess it's a trust thing. And I don't trust the state legislatures. I've watched what they do and the tangents they go off on. And I just see grizzly bears, we need them where they are. And I wish we could protect those lands. I wish we could take those public lands that remain around these grizzly populations and protect that. And let's not mine it, and let's not log it, and let's not graze it, and or at least let's not do things that cause conflict that requires bears to be killed. And I look at connectivity and corridors. We need ways to get, Yellowstone bears into the glacier population and vice versa, naturally. And I think, as Doug Peacock and others say too, is it's a bad idea to, well, I know how we can solve it. The humans will fix it, kind of like, transport salmon above and below the dams. Let's put grizzly bears in trucks and let's drive the ones from Glacier down and put them in Yellowstone. I call that kicking the can down the road. It's humans refusing to change their behaviors, development, nonstop, land being sold off, open space being devoured. And I see down the road that, sure, we look like we got a lot of grizzly bears, but that's not very many, considering when you think that's all that remains in the lower 48 states. But I'm for caution, and I'm for selective management where we can. If you got a problem grizzly and you can't resolve it any other way, yeah, we're going to have to probably kill that bear. But we got to put restraint on human encroachment, and a derogatory term I'm using these days is human infestation. I worry about that because bears they got to have space, they got to have room to grow and sustain themselves, and they've got to be able to breed. Metapopulations have to travel through corridors and get to each other, and they're not able to do that. So it's a trust factor, and I'm just afraid that we're going to go down that pathway of getting them delisted, and then they're at the mercy of reckless lawmakers that got plans for them, and I worry about that.
Yeah. You bring up some incredible points, and I think what's great about this, if you read through this entire article, and again, I encourage everybody to go there. We're going to have links, by the way, to all of the articles that Carter and I are talking about here in the description. So if you can't find them, you can just go to the description for the podcast. But what Doug really lays out here is, we're talking about the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, and 94 bears, brown bears, 5 black bears, 5 wolves were shot from the air between May 10th and June 4th. So a very big take. They were supposed to, I think, only take 25 bears, and the fact that that number shot up to over 100 is concerning. A lot of this has to do with the caribou herds, like we were talking about before with elk herds, deer herds. This has really been a point of contention up there. They're talking about the Mulchanta, I hope I'm saying that right, the caribou herd. The fall that's happened, it was 200,000 animals in 97. It's declined to drastically just over 12,000. I'm sure there are other factors involved. It's a little bit skeptical, as Doug puts in here, from his perspective. I think for many people to think that predators are the only reason why that herd has dropped so precipitously. It says even here, the causes of the decline, rather than wolves, were illegal overhunting, illegal poaching, climate change inflicted habitat loss, overgrazing, disease, all the things, Carter, that you have suggested. The board ignored this data, voting to extend the wolf control program and adding bears to the hit list. This decision was made without public comment and without adequate science. And that I think is the scary part. I mean, response to the carnage was swift and strong. In mid-June, the Anchorage Daily News carried this opinion: Alaska's bear slaughter is disgusting, heartbreaking. A couple of months later, the New York Times published Waterman's op-ed, Alaska's slaughter of bears must stop. He argued that the massacre was a foolish, quote, a foolish and hapless effort to protect, in ampersands, I guess there, by killing the bears, what is left of the plummeting numbers of the Mulchanta caribou herd. Like you say, this is, and again, I encourage everybody to read this because Doug does a fantastic job of really laying out everything here. Where does this sit on, like you said, you said you're nervous this was there about this coming to Montana, coming to Idaho, coming to the American West, because this is similar to how I think elk hunters and deer hunters feel, similar to caribou hunters up there in Alaska. What are things that people can do, I guess, to, in other words, who do they contact to talk about things like this, to understand that grizzlies are next, to talk about wolves, before we move on to the last part of this, the last article that we're going to talk about? Where can people have their voice be heard in this type of situation? Because it's not exactly here yet, but to speak up for grizzlies and wolves and say, hey, we don't want this to come to our state, to our wildlife that's here in these states.
Well, I still think the focus, first of all, so much of this is happening on, I've got to say, our public lands, whether you're in Alaska or whether you're here in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. So much of this predator killing and predator, you call it management, but it's predator killing, is on our public land. And I think if people care about open space and they care about the public land treasure that the country has set aside from going way back, we got to protect it. And we got to protect what lives in it. And in my opinion, we got to, wildlife and our natural resources should be the number one priority, not mining and logging and grazing and these other issues. And, looking my crystal ball down the line, there's already indications that the human population is going to want that public land someday too. We want it. We've built homes, we've taken up all of the private owned lands in this country, and it's already going on around the Yellowstone and glacier country. You have ranch land being converted into developments and human presence in more and more places. those people want entertainment, so the public lands are, let's put in a few more roads, let's make a little more area accessible. That's what worries me down the line, that we just keep progressively taking, and then we're worried about a bunch of grizzly bears, 700 of them or whatever in a certain little restricted zone. And we just that zone keeps closing. It gets tighter and tighter while human occupation and human use outside gets more intense. So
Yeah.
I think we just got to work toward finding ways to stop creating conflict with the bears that remain, so that we don't find more justification to kill more problem bears, as we call them. And the last thing I see is turning it over to lawmakers to decide, well, we need to kill more of them recreationally. Somebody needs a bear rug, somebody needs a grizzly bear mount. And yeah, what I see in Alaska, it's reprehensible when you resort to helicopters. It just tells me they're desperate to, certainly, most humans don't want to go out there and wade through deep snow and set traps and snares and trap a wolf, for instance. And same with grizzly hunting, you got to have an outfitter and pay somebody to take you. And apparently, when you resort to using helicopters, it tells me that the human capacity to take them by fair chase on the ground no longer exists, or you wouldn't be doing things like this. So that's why I have no trust. And my trust keeps fading more and more, that we're on this obsession with kill it, control it, take it out, remove it. And yet, if you look back 100 years historically, what's it accomplished? I mean, it really hasn't accomplished anything. If you overharvest caribou, or like where we brought the wolves down for the reintroduction from Canada, when you watch the forests being cut down in checkerboards, taking out every twig and branch, to make toilet paper even, and the caribou numbers declining because of their old growth being cut. Same area we brought the wolves from, they're killing 300-400 wolves a winter up there from helicopters to compensate for the few caribou that remain, while they're cutting down the forests that those caribou need. So yeah, I could just go off on these tangents and rabbit trails telling you why I don't trust the management that I see potentially coming down the road.
No, and I hear you, and this is why you're the perfect person to talk to, and why we're doing these Wolf Tracks episodes so that everybody can get all of this. And again, we'll have this article with all the other ones. So again, that's Alta Online, and just look for the Coming War on Grizzly Bears. And thank you to Doug Peacock for putting this all together. It's somebody, you need to read it. And those of you that are listening in Alaska, please read it and make your voice heard. Obviously, if this is something that speaks and calls to you. The last thing, Carter, I want to get to, because this, again, you segued perfectly, I think, without knowing it, talking about the trapping and snaring that's happening in Canada. And this, I really am looking forward to this documentary that's coming out from Exposed Wildlife Conservancy in partnership with John E. Marriott. And the documentary is called Trapped in the Past. And this really, I think, goes in depth about Canada's trapping. The documentary series is titled Trapped in the Past. Does Canada's trapping industry need change? I would say yes, just on its face. But it'll be a 3-part series, and I think really dive deep into what's going on, I think, and shine a light on what's been happening, and especially like you're talking about with the call of wolves, with the snaring and trapping of wolves up there. What's your initial, what are you looking forward to, I guess, with this? Because Exposed has done a lot of good work. What are you interested to see when this drops. I believe it comes online January 24th. So those of you, again, we'll have the link for Exposed in there so you guys can subscribe to their YouTube and watch this. What are things you're looking to, what's your hope when you hear about something like this, a documentary that got greenlit and that's being put together and that'll be released soon, so for the world to see?
Well, I just think people need to educate themselves by watching these films and reading these stories and listening to people like me just trying to make you aware. Why are we doing these things we're doing? You know, what's the justification? 100 years ago, we killed animals for fur because we wore it. We used it for clothing and warmth. I guess I can see a need for that. We don't need to be killing these remaining populations for fur. The fur industry, you can go on the internet and look at the 2023, 2024 fur market. It tells you that most of the animals that are being killed in mass numbers yet by trappers really are worthless. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but their fur pelt on their own warm body is of more value than killing a coyote for $10 or a marten for $30. So why are we doing this? And that's the things you got to read about and know that this is recreational again. These are, and I was a trapper once upon a time, and, take me back 50 years ago, I would have probably been defending what's going on. But I've lived that life. I've trapped, and now I'm not trapping, and looking at beliefs I had, and I was misguided. So to be up here snaring and trapping wolves, if it's not to save big game, which I don't believe it is, why are we doing it? And killing 100 wolves one or two of them might have been like the cattle killers next summer, but the other 98, are eating deer and elk and caribou and natural prey. So I just see that we put a different face on this, that you always hear wolves have to be controlled. They have to be. You can't just have 3,000 wolves in the northern Rockies without controlling them. And I debate that all the time. No, we don't have to, unless you really markedly see that they're making inroads. So this is about letting a bunch of folks, like I used to do, it's traditional, it's cultural. It's what the mountain men did when they, explored these regions of the country, and it's to keep this occupation going. And it's for someone's entertainment mostly, and put a little bit of, I call it pocket change, and maybe enough money to buy Christmas gifts, but nobody's really making a living at this. If you look at the market value of fur and $3, $4, $5 a gallon gas or diesel fuel in your pickup trucks and all of this. So I don't buy it anymore. And I wish we could just leave some of these populations alone. And you want to kill a wolf? I can see that. You want to trap a wolf? Catch a wolf or shoot a wolf. But to go out and catch 20 or 30 or 50, or even more reprehensible, send up helicopter teams all winter and shoot them by the hundreds. The wolves are going to repopulate. They're going to come back. But why are we doing it in the first place? Because if you left those wolves alone, their numbers would not constantly be being replaced like they are, because wolves wouldn't need to do that. But again, it's a huge topic. And if people are concerned about it, read about it, educate yourself, and find groups who are working on these issues, because they have a lot of the answers for you, and decide how you feel about it. And if you don't like it, express it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think this is, I believe this conversation is just one chapter in many other chapters that we're going to have on all these issues. And your perspective is obviously taken a huge thank you from me just for being open to this idea and to going through just, again, this, everyone who's listening, this is literally this is like 5 or 6 articles of many that we just decided to talk about today. And obviously we'll see to try and do another one possibly next month and continue this education and continue just really getting the information out to all of you so that you can see what's going on. Just to put a capper on the Exposed documentary, that series that's coming out. So the campaign that they were running, the Trapped in the Past campaign, is working toward a complete ban on the use of snares for commercial and recreational trapping, as well as modern ethical science and traditional knowledge-based updates to all trapping regulations for fur-bearing mammals, particularly large apex predators like wolves, coyotes, lynx, bobcats, and wolverines. And I know, Carter, we've spoken, I think, just on Messenger about wolverines, and wolverines are the next, there's only 300 or so left, and that federal legislation or those talks are starting to happen, that we need to start to protect those mammals and make sure that they have a chance to somehow recover and be able to roam freely, because they also need a lot of space to roam. Is there anything else that you want to put out there before we sign off and look forward, I guess, to the next episode of Wolf Tracks down the line?
No, I just think we need to really wake up and treasure what we have left. You can fly over this country and it looks pretty remote, and there's some remarkable open spaces left. But when you really get down on the ground and you look at the ability and the capability of humans to encroach all that open space, these populations are not necessarily secure. And you got the summertime you can drive your truck, but in the wintertime you can ride your snowmobile. You can get into that country. So, and I never understood why having a few hundred wolverines in the lower 48 states should entitle anyone to kill one of them. To allow, when I lived in Montana, I believe you could take 2 wolverines a winter, and the trappers I knew were out scouting a month ahead of time, finding these little pockets of wolverine, and there'd just be this race to go out there and be the guy to catch the one on the west side and the one on the east side or whatever. And it didn't take but sometimes a couple of days and they were dead. Nobody needs to kill a wolverine. Not in the lower 48, probably not in Canada or Alaska either, but I say let's get real. There's a lot of people like to take pictures of them. There's a lot of people like to just know they're out there, and I guess I'm one of those guys. I guess you think you need a wolverine to hang on your wall. Well, that's a luxury that I don't think we should be seeking these days. So maybe I've become a bleeding heart, but there is a limit to these populations, especially the wolverine is a good indicator. 300 is not very many. And I visited Colorado a few years ago talking about wolves down there, and drove up some of these roads, and gosh, there was just endless numbers of people in ATVs and side-by-sides, and there's no limit to where people cannot get to these days. And some of these places, looking up there, you could say, well, that wolverine wouldn't mind that high country. But these people, some elderly, some overweight, a lot of people that would never physically get to those places other than some mechanical conveyance were getting there. So I think we got to look down the road and say nothing is inaccessible, and all of these populations are vulnerable. That's my new philosophy.
Yep. And those are those are words I think to heed and are obviously taken very seriously over here. Carter, just again, thank you for being open to this. I look forward to doing this again. And like I said, everybody who's listening, check the description. You guys will be able to see all these articles. We'll have a link. We'll try and help Exposed get more traction too for their doc. And so you guys can read all this. And Carter and I we'll be back. Hopefully Steve will join us for the next one, and we'll talk some more of this stuff. But Carter, thank you so much for giving the time and sharing your opinions and your knowledge with everybody. Really appreciate it.
My thanks to you for dispensing this knowledge and information. It's really important. There's not enough of you and journalists and investigative reporters out there. I wish there were more of them, and that way people can learn, know what's going on, and make better decisions.
Absolutely. 100%. Hollis Teal out there, and we'll be with you next time. Bye, everybody. Looking for more information about Wolf Connection or the podcast? Please visit our website at wolfconnection.org, where you can donate, sponsor a wolf, or become a volunteer.